usually it'll train for a couple weeks on your data, your apps. Your app runs for 2 weeks, your system runs for 2 weeks. The monitor is looking at all these logs, and then you start putting it into protection mode instead of what do they call it, learning mode or whatever they call it. And now if it sees something that doesn't match the patterns that it's seen, it'll flag it as an anomaly, and then it'll alert either your security IT people, or you can even have it run some sort of action if you think that it definitely should never see it, this anomaly definitely should never happen. If you're confident about that, you can have it automatically run some Azure function to take action on whatever that is. So you can block the IP address that's trying to attack, or you can prevent a resource from being spun up, things like that.
It's funny that how the name, the continually keeps being like abbreviations and categories and names, right? And SOAR is the category where you orchestrate the response of security incidents, and you automate, hey, like you said, Jared, like blocking IP addresses based on incidents. There's a whole cottage industry of SOAR provided. There used to be SIM. SIM was all the detection capabilities, and then there came the SOAR category, which is all the orchestration of the remediation and automating that. Yeah. The one thing you touched on that it's really important for our audience to note is that these alerts, if you don't fine tune them appropriately, you're going to get false positive fatigue. You're just going to get, your system is going to throw a lot of alerts for everything. And then this is what I usually see happening is companies adopt these systems and they don't spend the time to actually fine tune the alerting. And then, it's all the generic alerts that are out of the box. And then they may not be very meaningful, right? You and I spend a lot of time in application security testing. And we always tell our clients, hey, don't look at the vulnerabilities, combine the vulnerabilities into threat scenarios and act based on threat scenarios that are applicable to you. And the same lesson, the same principle should be applied here for logging and monitoring. What companies should do is, rather than just look at all the alerts, which are the equivalent of the vulnerabilities, they should look at what are the threat scenarios that I'm in, that if they happen would be bad to my company. And then based on those threat scenarios, come up with controls, including the detective capabilities, right? For example, if a threat scenario is that someone is going to brute force the application and, bypass the authentication, gain access to sensitive data, then there should be logging and monitoring on failure and successive authentication. So depending on the threat scenarios and which ones are higher risk for the company, those are the alerts, the alerts should be fine-tuned to match those threat scenarios. Then you're not getting false positive fatigue. Then you're only getting alerts based on things that are relevant and contextual, in the same way that we apply that when we do the application security risk assessments.
Totally. Yeah, I definitely agree. Having context into what you see and deciding whether or not to act on those is hard enough, let alone when you have hundreds of thousands of results coming in every day. So having some automated system to help you with that and to help with visualization also. I mean, that's when you have a human looking at it. That's interesting as well, but also, just to be able to act and remediate on automatically is just so super helpful.
Yeah, and then building use cases. So I guess the formal terminology would be use case development. So before you start installing any of these things, you basically build those use cases, and how you build them is through threat modeling. So the first thing that I would recommend to the audience before they go down this path is spend the time, threat model your system, and then build those use cases, which would then raise alerts on the highest risk threat scenarios. Then go ahead and put together your logging and monitoring, services and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Because you want to see which. I mean, it doesn't hurt to just log everything, but especially for monitoring and alerting. Yeah. I mean.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, you look at the connections between your resources and where it's valuable, which applications are touching important data, which applications are externally facing or along some path accessible to some externally facing thing, and have start with your monitoring at those places. The internal network, of course, you want to eventually have the same kind of monitoring turned on, but I would say that the attack surface is only the people who are on your network. So there's a lower chance, at least in the beginning, just by numbers, that there will be some kind of attack there. Of course, insiders are a massive portion of attacks that go on out there. But I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that those types of companies have already done a lot to secure their externally facing things. And so the the next best place to try to attack them is from the inside. So as far as prioritizations go, because you can't do everything all at once, start by adding all this type of monitoring to your externally facing and services that are also along a path of externally facing things in your network, and then start from the inside out as well.